Welcome to Fog on Fire, a podcast about reflection, faith, grit, and getting back up. In every episode, host John Carpenter sits down with someone who's walked through the hard stuff, held onto their faith, and found something real on the other side. It may feel like it, but you are not alone in your journey. The fog lifts, and the fire remains. And there's another side, so let's have a conversation.
Father Rob, thank you so much for joining me today.
You're very welcome, John. Thanks for having me.
So Fog on Fire is about reflection. It's about challenges that people might have had in their lives. So starting with your story, how did you decide to discern to become, join the church, basically?
Sure. So grew up Catholic, raised from the very beginning, and went to church every weekend. Not hugely involved in the church, but faithful, celebrated traditions with the family, holidays. And when I was at grade school, I went to Catholic grade school, started to serve in fourth grade. Mm-hmm. And something there kind of struck me. The Mass, the priest, everything going on, and something kind of tugged about maybe doing this for a living. And it was there from fourth grade to end of grade school to think about priesthood. Mm-hmm. And I mean, there were struggles of, because I was a bigger kid, so there was mockings for Wade and mockings for being faithful and all this stuff. And, it stunk, but the calling was still there. And God helped see me through, looking back now, through family, through good friends that were present and loving me, but I couldn't see it then. They kind of focused on the bad, on the negative. And as I went into high school, I went to Trinity over in Garfield Heights. The call didn't waver. Mm-hmm. And, high school is a terribly awkward time for anybody. Yeah. And all the ups, all the downs, all the ins, all the outs, but it was still there. Mm-hmm. And after I graduated from Trinity, I went to John Carroll, and my thought was, well, I'm either going to preach it or teach it. So I got my undergrad in religious studies, my major, and I had a good experience in college, good people. You make your mistakes, you make your moments, but again, the faith didn't waver. Was I the strongest Catholic? Not really. I'd go to Mass, I'd pray, but it wasn't like I was, a monastic kind of living out a 6 a.m. to midnight schedule.
Sure.
But the call was still there. The pull was still there. The love was still there. And at the end of it, I said, okay, God, I got to actually make a decision. I got to stop running, stop thinking about it, stop hemming and hawing. And that's when I called a priest that actually was at St. Leo's where I grew up. He became vocation director. And we met one day for dinner and we talked about it. And before I knew it, I was in the application process. Mm-hmm. And that was back in 2009. And then fast forward, I was ordained a priest in 2015.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
So struggle-wise, obviously we all have that struggle in high school, right? What got you through those struggles? Because I think everyone has them. We just get through them differently.
I think a part of it was looking back, because in the moment, like I said, you don't really realize under the struggle or under the embarrassment or under the weight of it. But I had very good friends, supportive. Mm-hmm. I had loving family who challenged me, especially in the vocation. I remember my mom telling me that if you're going to do this, you can't do it for anybody but you. Because my grandmothers and grandfathers were very big influences in my life, but, don't do it for them. Don't do it for this. And a part of me didn't understand it. I thought, like, why aren't you happy for me? But looking back she was, but she wanted me to do it for the right reasons.
Yeah.
And I think looking back too, we hold so much to be so important in high school, like status and looks and who's got the friend group and who's cool. Well, that stuff melts pretty quick. Mm-hmm. But looking back at realizing how God was carrying me and caring for me, you just don't see it.
Yeah.
You just don't see it. And when I went to high school, it's run by the Supporting Order of Sisters. And there was a family member back in the day, a grandma's cousin who was a nun there. So I'd go to visit when I was younger, and there's a beautiful shrine to Our Lady on the grounds. So that would be a big help, because Mary's been a huge influence in my life. And looking back again, you see her hand leading, guiding, and how the protection might be invisible, but the force of it's felt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. So we could say there's any one person that affects it, or was it more the faith?
It was more the faith, acting through different people,
Mhm.
acting through people who are still good friends and who are still influences of my life, and but seeing how God does act in the strangest ways.
Yeah.
And sometimes in moments that seem like defeats are actually moments of victory. You just can't see that in the midst of it.
Yeah. So 2015, you get ordained, and where was your first place you were at?
I was sent to St. Ambrose down in Brunswick, big parish, active parish, and I loved it. Kind of overwhelming, kind of like being taught how to swim by being thrown into the Atlantic. But wonderful pastor down there, great people. But just because you get ordained doesn't mean you're not going to have challenges or druthers or struggles. I think I always struggle with comparison.
Sure.
And, now you can say, oh, comparisons are odious, but you think, well, do I have to be like this priest to be a good priest? Like, oh my gosh, I hope I can pray like that guy. I hope I can have a homily like this guy. And that weighed on me. That was a big struggle for my first few years until I came to a point with my spiritual director and other people that be the priest God is calling you to be. Don't worry about being Father so-and-so or being like so-and-so. Because if you do, what happens? You fall into vices, you fall into creature comforts, which don't really give anything. They kind of like, walking in a circle.
Sure.
But there comes a point where you're like, wait a minute. I'm not who I'm being called to be in my best self because I'm too worried about ABC all the way through, double F. But Lord, what are you wanting of me? I was being a lot harder on myself than God would ever be.
Yeah.
And it came a point of clarity, and I thank God for it. You don't realize that the cross is a blessing in the midst of it. But when I left St. Ambrose, I was a much, hopefully, humbler and stronger priest when I left there in 2019. And then I went to St. Angela Merici in Fairview Park.
Okay.
And I was able to flourish there, good pastor, great people, and grow and learn, especially during the whole COVID pandemic. It was very odd to have mass for nobody in front of a camera.
Yeah.
And, priests are communal, social people. We're ordained to serve. And it was very hard. But then to have to be forced to be creative, like we did drive through Palm Sunday, get your palms, get a blessing. But again, even in those moments, what seemed like, okay, this door's closed, we got to stop doing this. Well, no, how is God calling us to do it differently? Kind of like your podcast, you have a fog of this pandemic, but in the midst of it, there's a light and you can cut right through it.
So I know Father Mike Schmitz had a homily about comparison is the thief of all joy, basically. And so you mentioned you were trying to compare yourself to others. We all get into that. How can someone get through comparison? Like, that's a big one because I think I fall into it daily, and I've shared that with you. How do we get through that?
I think a big part of it is realizing that every single one of us, and not to sound cliche, are made and wanted and needed by God with the gifts we have. Now, I don't say that as if I've always had that. I've come to realize that because once we realize that God doesn't make junk, he makes saints, and that we are needed and wanted, and everyone is on their own journey. And the trouble is everyone's comparing themselves to somebody else. It's like the person who lives in the mansion. You could say, oh my gosh, my life would be perfect if I live there. But the person in the mansion has a lot more space to hide secrets and fears, and they're wishing they could downsize. So it's about where I am, Lord, is where you want me to be, and how do you ask me to grow in that? And it's being also happy for people. I noticed when I was really struggling with comparison, you get angry. Well, they shouldn't have that. They shouldn't look like that. They shouldn't be able to do that. Well, no, the more you're excited for somebody and happy for them, the more you can actually grow and realize what you have. It might be a challenge because we're all challenged to grow. So it might be for me, oh, wow, I could preach with a little more this. So, wow, I could approach people with more of this. Thank you. And I've said that to guys. It's like, I really appreciate what you do, how you work with those who might have mental health challenges. I appreciate the way you approach this situation. And it really allows you to be grateful and thankful, which brings joy. So that's been very helpful for me to just see others as gift, realize that I too am gift, because then it's not a competition.
Yeah.
Because comparisons breed competition.
Yeah.
And if I bring this person down, I'll lift myself up, which never really works.
Yeah. And I think in comparison, we all kind of feel like we want to be someone else, but yeah, you're losing the gifts that you have, right? And we're not using them the right way. You are able to bring in humor into your homilies and things you do. Is that just the person who you are? You've just been a funny guy, or do you try to bring it in, or it just happens?
I think I've always been a guy of good humor at points. Some people might say differently, but I think humor is the way God works.
Mhm.
I don't think we really sometimes realize that God is a God of joy, and we talk about that word joy, but we don't really understand that God made us to be ultimately joyful in and of himself, in him, but also for us to bring others joy. There's so much heaviness in the world, especially right now, so much sadness, so much negativity, focusing on what isn't working, but what is working.
Mm-hmm.
And also to shed light that in every situation in life, God is there wanting to work. It's not just on the big mountaintop moments. It's not just in the deep theological discussions, which we need and to be challenged or to grow, but it's also in the moments when we find ourselves getting angry in the checkout line at a store and God's saying, wait a minute, take a breath, calm down, where are you going? It's bringing these moments in because we can laugh at ourselves and have a moment of levity.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, wait a minute, why am I being so upset about A? Why am I this? Because we're all going through the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sometimes the biggest humor point of all.
Yeah.
Because joy is a precursor of heaven. Joy is a precursor of eternity. Heaven's not just going to be a drudgery and we're walking around all day with our heads hung. It's ultimate joy in the Lord. So if we can have that now, we hear rejoicing all the time in Scripture. If we can live that out now, and even in moments of sorrow, how can we realize God is with us, which is its own joy? So to try to bring that in and help people realize that being Catholic, having faith, isn't a curse or punishment, it's freedom.
Yeah. I think if you bring back reflection, because you were talking about that, is what you just mentioned too. You bring reflection into that through the joy of getting there. When you reflect on your path, how can other people reflect on theirs to kind of think of maybe they didn't see good then, but they could see it now?
Well, absolutely. So it's tough again in the moment on the storm to realize who's with you in the storm. But to take a moment to just look back and say, Lord, remind me where you were. It's like that classic story of Jesus walking with a guy on the shore and he's saying, I'm with you always. And the guy says, what happened here, here, and here? I don't see two sets of footprints. And Christ says, well, that's where I carried you. Mm-hmm. We don't realize that his promises endure. Mm-hmm. So remembering that for myself, and that I'm not just as a priest preaching and teaching and celebrating sacraments for people, I'm also in the midst of it and being saved. God's speaking to me. So realize that I too need forgiveness, that I too don't have it all together, that I too need to be humble and grow. It gives good introspection and reflection to look back saying, wow, when I was open to you, Lord, and walking with you, I could really sense it. But there were moments when I tried to do it on my own and I failed. So I think sometimes it's letting the guard down, because we like to put our guards up and not admit we need God or need other people. But it's realizing, no, we weren't meant for that.
Mm-hmm. Now, in a world of the Catholic Church, how can people look at themselves a little bit differently? I think that a lot of us we see things differently than other people. And we've talked about reflection and we've talked about, that kind of thing. But how can they look at it when they walk in to sit down, that they are different people? We all see things differently. How can you help them through your homily in that regard?
Sure. So I think that the late Pope Francis had a great line about the church, that this isn't a museum for the sanctified, for saints. It's a field hospital for sinners. We're all wounded somehow, whether it be physical wounds, mental wounds, spiritual wounds, emotional wounds, but we're not only our wounds. I think the trouble is sometimes we sit in our sorrow, or sit in our failures, or sit in our fears or limitations or judgments or comparisons. And the Lord does, yes, meet us there, but he always, always challenges us to walk forward. Think of the woman caught in adultery. He doesn't say, well, you go out and just don't do it again, or, try not to get caught. He says, go and sin no more. So how are we called as we come into the church to realize we're wanted there? God just is expecting people who float to come in. We're all wanted there, needed there, but also they need to take us on a different path, take us on a different journey, and to be open to that. And we might be afraid. That's okay. Because what's one of the most quoted lines of scripture? It's in scripture hundreds of times. Be not afraid. You're made for more, and I am with you. So that's the big thing. We have nothing really to fear. So we take a deep breath and we live that out. Boy, there's strength in that.
What are you seeing in the church that is surprising to you lately?
I'm seeing a lot of reversion. So maybe people have left the church for whatever reason, trying it out again, kind of coming home, to coin a phrase. People looking for some stability, people looking to go a little deeper, because a lot of stuff right now is kind of at the surface level, and going deeper than just a look, a want, a need, a fear, and kind of going down to, who am I? Why am I here? They're kind of the big ticket questions. Is there a God? What's going on? And to tackle those and then grow from there. People want to get involved in something that's going to help others. I'm seeing people who want to really get involved and spread faith and help others know faith, whether it's to be Catholic or just help them know God himself.
Sure.
And I think we're seeing this as a result of people just kind of tired of the mundane or tired of the constant barrage of bad news or negativity, that there is joy. There are good things happening. At the end of the day, God wins.
Yeah.
And I think I'm seeing people coming to know that or wanting to believe that and needing to start somewhere.
Speaking of the good news, during COVID, there was an actor, John Krasinski from The Office. He did a YouTube show called Only the Good News, and because there was so much bad news going on. So he was only sharing the good news of what was happening. And I think that was pretty key. It did pretty well for people because they just wanted to hear good. They didn't want to hear bad. Now, we get into Mass and we think like, all right, we're going to be here for an hour. And I know a lot of times people are watching their watches and they're like, I've got to get out of here. You do a very good job of reminding people that it's more than just that 1 hour of faith, right? I think for me, I have an hour of it every day. But what's a good way for someone to live with the Lord on a daily basis if they can't it's not just one time a week, right?
Oh, absolutely. I always consider Mass to be our weekly tune-up and check-in.
Okay.
We receive what we can't get anywhere else. It's like going to the mechanic. You're not going to change every fluid and change your belt. They're going to do it. But then you go out and you live it. And you allow for every day the challenge of quiet, of silence. A lot of Mass is quiet and reflection, which is awkward. We live in such a busy, noisy, constant world. So how do we challenge ourselves to maybe have an hour during the day, or start with a half hour, 15 minutes, shut the phone off, take time, whether it be with scripture, whether it be with just, taking deep breaths and calling on the name of the Lord, whether it just be writing things down that bother us. And why does that come up again and again? People will say, Father, I try to pray and I'm constantly getting interrupted. Well, bring the interruption to prayer. Maybe that's some God saying is, I need to let me in to take care of this blockage, so that way my grace can flow. And that way we take the time, and it might be small. Sometimes we destroy ourselves before we start. Every day I want to have an hour of introspection. Well, if you're not used to it, that's like going around a marathon and you can't walk around the block. So you're going to get a cramp and then faint and say the heck with it. Well, same in prayer. So it's like, don't give up just because you falter in the beginning. But what happens at Mass empowers us to be what we celebrate, to be church, because church isn't just a building. It literally means the gathering of God's people. So it's being empowered through the week and then coming every weekend to be strengthened and reminded we're not in this alone. There are others here who struggled this week. There are others here who are wounded. There are others here who might have been doing great and then they tripped and they need God's forgiveness. So I think that taking it in stride and allowing the Lord to grow us and stretch us and not just trying to do it all ourselves is really important.
Speaking of adoration, the gentleman who was on the last episode, Darren Douglas, he goes through he delivers fuel across Cleveland, and he wherever he is, he tries to get to an adoration chapel if he has time, because he wants to spend that quiet time with the Lord. Now, we have an adoration chapel here. How often is it used, or is it used often, or do people really get into it?
Absolutely. We're very blessed here. So our adoration chapel is opened during the day from, I believe, 5 a.m. until 10 p.m.
Okay.
And then actually we can get in after that. There's a code you can just call and get.
Mm-hmm.
People are in all the time. And yes, you have your classics, ladies praying for everybody. You have people you would imagine would be there, but there's a lot of young adults. There's a lot of people who work up at Fairview Hospital will come in on their breaks. There's a lot of people in the neighborhood who will walk up and just sit in the silence and listen. That's probably the biggest challenge of adoration. Yes, we know the Lord is there. Yes, we know he wants to act, but it's just getting ourselves okay with being in the quiet with him. One of the best ways I've ever heard it, it's heart speaking to heart.
Mm-hmm.
But to allow our heart to be quiet is key. And a lot of people will go and they'll say, why didn't you get anything out of it? That's okay. Try it again.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of it is, what are you giving to it? And maybe all we have is busyness and noise. Give that.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing God doesn't want or know of in our life. So how do we do that? And a lot of people take the challenge, and a lot of people, I'm amazed, are in there, if not 24/7, it's at least 22/5. They really utilize that space.
Yeah, he does a prayer journal, and some days he said that he doesn't hear anything, and other days he's got a whole page to write down. So yeah, if we're there to listen. So last thing, how can people listen for God? I think, we do live in a noisy world, right? It's digital. Things are flying at us, notifications all over the place. How can we listen?
That's a very interesting question. So God's going to work as God's going to work. There are moments people literally hear in their heart, in their mind, the voice of God. Excellent. But God also works through others. I go back to the scriptural passage of the calling of Samuel, and he's in the temple, and he's the priest is in the other room, and it's nighttime, and he hears his name, and he runs to the priest. He goes, I didn't call you. He hears his name again. He runs to the priest. I didn't call you. And it hears his name a third time, and the priest gets it and goes, next time you hear the voice, say, speak, Lord, your servant's listening. And to just be able to do that, and just be able to take a breath and realize it's going to be awkward, and it might be fearful, because a lot of the noise is comforting. And we can kind of be in control of it in a way. We think we can turn this down or ignore this. But with God, we're not in control. So just to take a moment and say, speak, Lord, your servant's listening. But you never said that before. Maybe never thought of that before. Or even, heck, we never even prayed that before. But just to offer God the space, and then to make room, kind of like doing an interior spiritual spring cleaning. We all have things we need to get rid of physically in our life. How about inside? What have we held on to for decades? But it's allowing ourselves to be okay in the quiet, and letting God go to that place of worry, hurt, fear, trepidation, laziness, stubbornness, and letting him clean it out. So we have the room for him to work.
Amazing. And you are simply amazing. So tell people how they can visit with you.
You can visit with me by coming to OLA. We have our rectory here in the back of the parking lot, and making an appointment. You can head to our website, which is Our Lady of Angels here in Cleveland. You can find us on any search engine. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and to either shoot me an email or come in and give me a phone call, make an appointment, or come visit us. We have masses Saturday at 4:00 and Sunday at 9 and 11. And we'd love to see you. And again, all are welcome here. It's always wonderful to have guests and visitors to see what's happening here at Our Lady of Angels.